Gotta love that percussion. Hi again, everybody. Welcome in to UnAnchored Boston with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch, and as always, we're brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course. And by the big wheel himself, George Gray, at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. All right. This is a busy time of the year. Baseball free agency used to be the most popular free agent sport, but National Football League has surpassed Major League Baseball with their signing period, pre-signing period, legal period, tampering period. But anyway, to sort it all for us now, we have the one and only Karen Guregian, the masslot.com and formerly of the Boston Herald, and always in our hearts from the great town of Chelmsford, Mass. And Robert Lobel, take it away with the formal introduction of our guest.
Well, Karen, of course, star of a stage screen and the Dynasty, as she is sprinkled throughout the Dynasty in videos. What are you smiling at, Karen?
I'm smirking.
Smirking. That's the difference than a smile.
Yeah, starring meaning you could see the back of my head a few times.
Well, you got to, there's a lot of people that would like to even get the back of their heads in that video. So, but no, I've seen your face, and I've seen. Well, anyway, you deserve.
Good thing it was a non-speaking part. That's all I have to say.
Everybody that had a speaking part, raise their hand, okay? Oh well, Mike, that yours didn't really count, Mike. Did it?
I don't know. It was, just right out of the chute.
That's true. You were right out of the chute.
Mm.
Well, Karen, it's great to see you, and I know that. Things could break at any time. This is a crazy time. It's been a crazy week.
I'm ready.
I know you're ready. So say your phone is right there. You're ready. Anything could happen today. But before we get started, both Mike and I wanted to ask you and talk to you a little bit about the great Joe Fitzgerald, who passed away. And I know you worked with Joe for quite a while at the Herald, and he was quite a guy.
Yes, he was. A terrific columnist, both in sports and news. But I remember him for being a wonderful man and a great mentor to me. I arrived at the Herald right out of college. Actually, before I got out of college, I was really as you might say, a green rookie coming into the Herald, and I had not much experience at all. So, I was kind of making my way and trying to make a name. And every time I was in the office, if Joe was there, he would always take the time to talk to me, support me, telling me I was doing a good job. Kind of reinforcing the things, that I was trying to do. And, having somebody like that at that time frame in my sports writing journey was so important. Having validation from somebody like him, again, it helped propel me. So I can't say enough about Joe.
Let me, when he did sports for so long, but then he sort of, drifted off and brought the human touch to some of the tough stories that were around our city during his tenure. And he really had a skill for that, getting I'm ripping off Up Close and Personal from ABC Sports, but that's what it was when Joe wrote.
Yeah, he, like you said, he humanized a lot of the subjects that he wrote about. And again, I just like, even for myself, there was always a comfort level talking to him. In my case, it was like talking to my father, I mean, he was just very warm. He was passionate about things. And I also think whether it was an athlete, a politician, whoever, there was a comfort level talking with him. And, a lot of his columns were wonderful things, views from whether it was an athlete or a politician or whatever. he really got to the essence of the subjects he wrote about. And I'll never forget, but I learned this from him too. Every interview he ever did, I mean, it's not like that interview just served the purpose for the column at hand. He had files and files and files and files from all of these interviews he did. And if the occasion was right, and again, he would remember each of these conversations, he would dig out quotes here and there from somebody he spoke with in the past, that, if it was a relevant point, he would dig up something from ML Carr again. He would dig up something from Bobby Orr again that was said 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years ago. So he had this huge library of interviews that he would, if he had to, relive on occasion. So, but I learned that's a valuable lesson to, no interview, it's not like a one-time shot. You can, bring those people back or bring those interviews back.
I think, if I'm not wrong, he started in Concord, New Hampshire at the Monitor. But I just also think that he was also a stalwart as far as keeping the old Boston Garden. That was his mission. He did not want a new Boston Garden. And in many ways, the TD Garden, as great a building as it is, it did not bring along the quirks and good things about the old Boston Garden that you really enjoy seeing in a lot of, film clips and everything that's put on, because it was a very unique place, and he saw it as a very unique place. And once it was destroyed, there was no getting it back. Not that we didn't improve, but you know what I'm saying.
I almost think a part of Joe was destroyed when that building went down. I mean, I think he had the same passion for like Fenway Park, because in a lot of these places, whether you're a fan or you're a writer, a lot of your memories are etched in these buildings or things that happen in those buildings. That's where your fondest and least fondest memories come. And I think the garden in itself sometimes was the story, whether it was too hot, whether they were playing in 120 degrees against the Lakers at one time, whether they had to delay a Stanley Cup game because of the fog on the ice. But that building created stories. Plus, I do miss, there wasn't an ambiance you don't get with the new building, especially with hockey and the closeness. Everyone, it seemed like the fans were on top of the action, and they literally were, because of the closeness and the smallness of the rink. And there is something lost, with that kind of intimacy that the Garden gave you, especially it's probably for both, but mostly for hockey games.
Yeah, I totally agree. Although the obstructed seats were part of its charm.
That too, yeah.
You can still get a few at Fenway Park if you want to go. I don't want to shift over. If we can talk about Joe all morning, but I did want to have a chance for you to talk about him, because I know how much you cared about him and how much he meant to you.
Yes, I love the man, and as I said, he was very important in me, continuing on, or as I said, having some kind of validation that I was on the right track, and heading in the right direction, attacking stories or columns. Again, when you're young, you don't know if you're doing things the right way or have the right ideas. And as I said, Joe was constantly patting me on the back, telling me I was doing well. And I don't think it was just lip service. So So I really appreciated him for, being such an important person early on in my career.
Well, as a former coach of the Patriots would say, on to Cincinnati. And Mac Jones, although he's not on to Cincinnati, he's on to Jacksonville.
He is.
So I think, Lynchy, what do you think? We should probably jump right into this crazy thing that
we can do what's going on with the Pats right now, and then let's maybe get Karen's take on the Dynasty a little bit later on in the show. But let's start.
And the Bruins. I got to talk to her about the Bruins because they are a hot mess right now. But
all right, I feel better about them this year than I did last year at this time. I was so worried about.
That's interesting because I don't.
So worried about this stupid chase for the President's Cup. What it was going to do to them, and I kept telling everybody that I've seen this movie before, so I'm okay right now. I'm okay. They've got about a month or so, maybe a little bit less, to turn things around. I'm okay. Karen,
I'm going to jump in there on the Bruins too. I think Bob, you're going to be shocked. They're in great shape because no one is expecting them to do anything, right? Everyone knows they're not quite as good as they were last year when they were the perfect team with the best record ever. All these expectations, boom. Now they will enter the playoffs with zero expectation, and that'll take the weight off of them. And I could see them winning a round, maybe two, just because no one's expecting it. How's that, Bob?
I'll have to sit on that for a minute. I don't mind coming back to it later, but I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. I'm just not buying it.
why?
But that's we'll get back to it later. I want to get on to Cincinnati for the moment.
I know they can't score. Their defense they're not tough. They have two goalies who love each other. Isn't that something?
Well, yeah, okay, there it is. But I think
that something? Doesn't that count?
Karen, it is. But even two rounds at your optimistic self.
I'm giving them a round, and then
a round isn't enough. I'm not. Are you going to be content with a round? A round is one better than no rounds.
Well, it's one round better than last year.
I know, but is that it? Would you rather get a round instead of the President's Cup? Is that what you're trading off here? We'll give up the President's Cup. I'm joking about the President's Cup because it's a joke, but I'm just saying a round is good enough to, coronate them as a team of the future.
Hey, I'm not. I didn't say any of that. I'm just saying that they might exceed an expectation this year, whereas they fell on their face last year. Look at I'll end with this for my point. The year the Florida Panthers had the best record and were the number one team, just like the Bruins, they got bounced out in the first round. The next year, when nobody was expecting it, they not only bounced out the Bruins, but they got to the Stanley Cup final. That's all I'm saying. Things happened in crazy ways.
I don't disagree with that. However, all right, let's move on.
When you least expect it, watch out, Bob.
Okay, yeah, well, that means the Red Sox are going to win the World Series and the Patriots are. Well, how much would you get for a parlay there? The Red Sox win the World Series and the Patriots win the Super Bowl. What's that parlay worth?
I might be crazy, but I'm not delusional. The Red Sox are doing nothing.
Okay, on to Cincinnati for the third time.
Okay.
Tell me about your reaction to what is it, Mikey? The quarterback situation?
Let's get Karen's thoughts on the deportation of Mac Jones, and B, the crazy contract that they're given this backup quarterback here, Brissett.
Well, number one, Mac Jones had to go.
Yep.
That in my mind was non-negotiable. They didn't get much for him. I was told by an executive months ago, like while it was right after the season, they might get a fourth or fifth round pick for him, even though he was a first rounder. They took a sixth and ran basically, but it was of their own doing mostly. Promising. They took him 15th overall. He had a very good rookie year, and then they gave him Matt Patricia, and it went downhill from there. So, and Bill Belichick didn't really like him all that much, and didn't talk to him for periods of time. So all of these things added up to basically, uh, turn Mac. Basically Mac Jones is like hit rock bottom, and it was mostly a mental thing. So he needed the change of the scenery, and the Patriots needed a change of scenery from him as well. So it was something that was mutually beneficial to both sides.
So what about his presence in the quarterback room? We hear so much about that. It's the first time I've never heard so much talk about the quarterback room as I have, this off season. But he was a negative influence with his body language, with his pouting, with his sulking, and with his questioning decision makings, particularly play calling.
Well, I think that was actually more how he annoyed the coaching staff as opposed to the quarterback room, But I mean, he was going through issues and problems, and wasn't I don't know, with Bailey Zappi and Belichick kind of favoring Zappi and embarrassing Mac at home and having fans chant Bailey Zappi's name. Again, it created friction, you know. It doesn't mean that they were all bad characters, but it was an uncomfortable situation in the quarterback room, to the point where, one or some of them, they would watch film separately. And it was very noticeable when the quarterbacks came into the locker room after practice. None of them came in together. None of them chatted at their lockers. So it was pretty obvious. I mean, there was a chill around the quarterbacks. So it wasn't the best situation, and probably not the most a situation that wasn't conducive to producing, the desired effect on the field.
Is the locker room still? I haven't been in that locker room for 2 or 3 years. Is it still set up numerically, or do they go by position?
Oh no, they sort of go by position.
Okay.
They plot people next to each other who they want to have next to each other in terms of the position groups.
Yeah.
But they'll have a quarterback will have a wide receiver next to him, or something like that, or the other quarterback, one of the other quarterbacks, or the tight ends. They're kind of all on the same wall.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because before they changed all these numbers, I mean, it would be automatic. The next number 12 would be number 11, and back and forth would be for number 13 or 14. But
they actually put a little more thought into it, and there's actually like desired real estate or desired spots that they give certain players. Like, the one I'll bring up is where Willie McGinnis used to sit. He used to have the locker right next to the door, like the doors to go out, and he was put there because that was the last player Bill wanted players to see on their way out to practice. Because if there was ever a problem, like Willie was the police guy, like he would stop guys at the door, and if there was a problem, if there was some issue, Willie was kind of like the enforcer in the locker room. So in subsequent years, you have had other people have that locker. Hightower had that locker. It's usually to some linebacker, So Juan Bentley has that locker now. So the succession of who sits where, can have a little meaning, let's say.
So,
All right. Any discussion with Jacoby Brissett has to go hand in hand with the upcoming draft.
Well, yeah, I think that I wrote that that's a telltale sign. They're going to draft someone, and I think they're going to take a quarterback at number 3. I mean, if they had signed a Baker Mayfield or a Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins, that's more of a sign that this is, you don't sign those kind of guys to be placeholders. That's your quarterback. So Jacoby Brissett comes in as kind of the guy who, depending on how well they're able to, rebuild the offense, he's the guy who's going to take the lumps as opposed to the rookie. But mostly he's there because of the quarterback room thing dynamic that we just talked about. There's not going to be, they're going to compete for a job, but it's not like whoever wins or loses, there's going to be this divide. Jacoby understands what his job is. He understands why he's signing in New England. He's there to be the stopgap, the placeholder, but he's also there to kind of be like a role model in terms of his work ethic and so on and so forth for the young kid coming up. And he's also there. I mean, if you get some star quarterback in, a lot of those guys don't bother with the rookie. They don't want to help the guy who's going to take their job. So, Jacoby knows why he was brought here, and he will carry out and do what he's supposed to do until the rookie is ready.
So one of the big 3 quarterbacks on the board. I'm not lumping Kent Nix into that group. One of them is going to be available at number 3.
Yep,
and maybe 2 of them at number 3 if someone takes Marvin Harrison at 1 or 2. So, which one would be the best scenario for the Patriots to be available?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on, again, what their vision of the offense is. Although Alex Van Pelt basically said they'll build the offense around the quarterback. I mean, Jaden Daniels is basically a younger version and a skinnier version of Lamar Jackson.
Right.
So he can throw the ball. I mean, I think he throws the ball better than Lamar Jackson did when Lamar Jackson was a rookie. But he's a great running quarterback, mobile quarterback. He can run, and I'm not saying just gain 10 yards. He can take it to the house like Lamar, if there's space. So he's really, I don't want to say the prototypical for today's NFL quarterback, but he's on the end of the Lamar Jacksons and the Kyler Murrays of the world. But what ultimately happens to those quarterbacks is they get hit enough or injured that they ultimately become more pocket passers who run on occasion, as opposed to having plays scripted to run. Drake May, it has mobility, but you're not going to script plays for him to run. And that's kind of the difference. They both have very good arms. And, I've heard positive things about Drake May in terms of his leadership and, getting the players around him to play or, stuff like that. So, I think either choice would be interesting. I think Drake May might fit more to what the Patriots might be looking for. But I don't think that Jaden Daniels would be a bad pick either.
Do you see
She just left out Caleb.
Well, I think he's gone. I don't think that's an option. I think the Bears are taking Caleb, and if they don't, the only scenario I see is having them flip with Washington. Now, why would they do that? Because Washington's offensive coordinator coached him at USC, and that's Cliff Kingsbury. So if Chicago has any doubts, I mean, Caleb Williams is the most talented quarterback. There are issues that people are worried about, in terms of some of his makeup, let's say. But in terms of pure talent, Caleb Williams is up here and everybody else is down here. So either Chicago is going to take him based on his talent, or if they're nervous about anything, they will. My guess is they'll flop with Washington, because Washington knows Cliff Kingsbury is plugged into this kid, having coached him at USC, and I'm sure Cliff Kingsbury will say, "No, bring him on. We'll be fine with him." So I cannot see him falling to 3, and I cannot, for any reason, see the Patriots surrendering a ton of draft capital to move up the board.
You seen any C.J. Stroud and this kid out of LSU?
Well, I think there could be a C.J. Stroud in a couple of these guys, but it's just odd. A lot of people like all 3 guys, but the odds are only one of the 3, if any of the 3, turn out to be the stud, but you also have to consider, I think Bryce Young was hurt, who's taken first by Carolina last year. I think he was hurt by being thrown into a situation kind of like Mac Jones was year 2 and 3. His offensive line was awful, didn't have weapons, and he was just supposed to, as a rookie, overcome, running for his life and not being scarred by that. I really don't think you should put a rookie into a situation that could potentially hurt his development, like Bryce Young was, like Mac Jones was. So I think if you put any of these guys in a good situation, if you have the offensive line taken care of, if you have legitimate weapons, people who can get open and get open quickly, that's basically helping your young quarterback develop into something, as opposed to constantly running for his life his first year.
So if the Patriots get one of these, well, they're going to get one of these 3 guys. So who the hell is he going to throw to?
Well, that's right now that's a big issue.
Yeah.
And they still really, re-signing Mike Onwenu was very good. Signing the tackle from Pittsburgh was good, but you still need more reinforcements. You really don't have a left tackle, so you don't have a blindside protector yet. You can't throw a kid in there with no blindside protector, and they'll say, well, if it's Jane Daniels, he has all this escapability. Well, guess what? Bryce Young had escapability too. And so did, like, Justin Fields, his first year in Chicago. He's a mobile quarterback. He was sacked like the most times his first year. Why? Because rookie quarterbacks are still learning, and they're not always as confident in their reads. And if they take that half second longer, they're dead. They're going down with a bad offensive line. So, again, these are all things that you have to weigh in. Right now, would I play a rookie in that Patriots offense right now as presently constituted? No.
Mike, I'm still trying to wrap my head around Belichick. I hate to even talk about him anymore because he's history. I mean, he's ancient history, a good history by and large, but he's ancient history and how he's going to be remembered here. And I just can't get my head around how much of this did he cause himself? How much of this was the fact that he was an alpha and Kraft was an alpha and Brady was an alpha and, the whole relationship thing that's being brought up on the Dynasty. I can't wrap my head around how I feel about Belichick because it seems like there was a Belichick before and a Belichick after. And I guess you're going to say, well, a before and after is Brady, but I don't think necessarily. I think it's just evolved, and that's what I can't get my head around.
Yeah, I think it evolved through success, and for lack of a better word, although it might be the right word, he developed an arrogance, about, just how good he was as a coach and decision maker. And, I think he was hard pressed to acknowledge or recognize how much he was helped by having Tom Brady. But again, when you win and you win and you win and you win, again, your ego, goes up. It's hard not to, have your ego develop like Belichick's did. But then it just got to a point where he was too stubborn and too obstinate and did things to try and prove that it was him and not Brady. And he made poor decisions. They were poor. I mean, again, he had total control. He had final say. And in the years post Brady, or even toward the end of Brady, the drafts were not fruitful. The free agent signings weren't as fruitful as they were in the past. And, while he got away with not surrounding Brady with much, he couldn't get away with doing that, post Brady. And the other thing is, I just don't think he's a defensive mind, a defensive genius. And I think he thought he could win with any quarterback. And I also think that he didn't totally adjust to the league becoming offense first. So, I think it was definitely time to part ways with him and start anew, start fresh, because the roster. I mean, as of last year, they had basically one of the worst, if not the worst, rosters in the NFL, and that falls on Belichick.
Why does everyone have to say parted ways? The Patriots or Robert Kraft. Why can't they just say he was terminated? Why can't they say he was fired? Why do they have to say they parted ways? Because he was fired.
I think because Robert Kraft doesn't, wants his hands clean. He wants to protect his legacy. Well, I didn't want him to leave, but we decided together to part. And just like with Brady, well, Bill told me he was done, right? But again, Robert is the guy who's legacy conscious.
You think?
So again, he's shifting his part in all these narratives to other people.
How much of that is filtering down to the fans? How much of that? Well, I guess let me talk about the Dynasty. Let me talk about my camping friends at Cold Springs RV first, and then we'll come back and talk about what was coming up here. How much is filtering down to the fans? How much is the Dynasty backfiring on Robert? and whatever, those kinds of thoughts. You okay with that, Mike?
I'm great. Read the smart.
Mm.
All right, here we go. Campers, get ready for 2024 with a new RV. Cold Springs RV has the latest in pop-ups and travel trailers and fifth wheels and motorhomes. First of all, you have to be able to identify each and every one of them. If you see them, that's a travel trailer or that's a pop-up. Not a pop over, a pop up. You have to be able to identify them. And when you need an RV or service, get to Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire, which is just west of Goffstown and north of Dracut or Chelmsford. Somewhere in that,
Swampscott.
Somewhere out there. Yes, everything's north of Swampscott. So check out the all-new Winnebago Access Travel Trailer now on their lot. Don't forget to tell them Bob Lobel and Mike Lynch sent you, and learn more at coldspringsrv.com. And Mike, Karen, you've fielded this question before, but he's going to put a new twist to it.
All right. So we've asked you before. We're going to give you the Lobie Cruiser when it's finally built. We don't know when it's going to be built. You get to drive across country. We've asked you this before, but you have to pick one of the characters from the Dynasty. One of the characters that was interviewed, one of the players, coaches, state trooper from New Jersey, whatever. So of all the characters that have appeared on camera in the Dynasty, which one would you like to ride shotgun, ride shotgun with you across country?
Dion Branch.
Yeah,
Wow.
really.
Good one. Wow.
I was riveted to him in the Aaron Hernandez episode. And the pain in his face was palpable, in that he was self-described the player who was closest to Aaron Hernandez on the team. He befriended Hernandez, and as it turns out, he was the player that Bill Belichick would go to kind of get the temperature on Aaron Hernandez. But you could see, Dion, and when he said, "I should have seen it. I should have known," and he didn't, and the angst he felt for not being able to see what Aaron Hernandez really was, you could tell it still disturbs him to this day. So yeah, I'd like to be in the Winnebago with him, put my arm around him, tell him it's okay.
He was good. He was really good.
He was, and that's a great choice, Karen. I'm thinking, Malcolm Butler, because I want to find out what happened in Minneapolis, in that Super Bowl against the Eagles. But Dion Branch, and I know he said I should have seen it, but you never see. You see maybe the guy's going to go off the rails a little bit, but you never see a guy as a murderer. That's a scenario nobody ever foresees.
No, but you could still again see the angst and turmoil in Dion Branch, and recalling his relationship with him and trying to help him, again, not with being a murderer, with just, stay away from these guys, come on, Aaron, you don't need these guys. And basically having whatever friendship he had with Aaron basically amount to nothing because Aaron didn't listen. So I don't know. As I said, it was very compelling. It was very poignant. That episode in particular, just to hear, again, I was there during that time. I was in the locker room talking to players, even Aaron Hernandez during that time. And even talking to players privately, you didn't get any sense of what came out in that documentary episode about their feelings toward Hernandez, what he was like at practice, how Brady had to step in and kick him out once. while Belichick basically put up with it. Very interesting.
Yeah, it was. It was fascinating. Totally. Which I guess brings us to the whole discussion of the whole Dynasty project, which has been nothing but fascinating and certainly an opportunity for people to talk more about the Patriots as we moved into this season of draft picks and the draft and keeping them front and center. But go back to the question of Robert Kraft and how the fans feel and how he's come across in this documentary.
Well, I think, it's a Kraft production, for one, so people are aware of that. And number two, it's interesting that a lot of people from episode to episode, Bill Belichick isn't cast in the best light, both from things that have happened, number one, and number two, how he handled the questioner, basically how he handles all of us media types. He was, standoffish, defensive, didn't cooperate, fell on answers. Well, I talked about that before, or I'm not going to get into that, or whatever. He did not present himself in the best manner. And again, it's one thing for him to do that on a day-to-day basis to all the reporters, trying to get information out of him. But if he was going to sit for this documentary, which he did, I think the viewers had an expectation that he wouldn't be the difficult person that he showed to us practically on an everyday basis. Yeah.
How about his posture during it? Did think maybe someone be maybe.
Well, again, it's just you could tell he didn't want to be there. Number one. Number two, he wasn't. He was gonna not give them anything. And again, just didn't smile. He was just dour, and just again, the presentation of him wasn't, didn't cast him in the best light. But neither did any of these episodes. And Kraft kind of pointed a finger at Bill several times for several things happening. Most notably Brady. Most notably Malcolm Butler. And Kraft apologized to the world for Aaron Hernandez, while Belichick just mumbled and didn't want to go there.
I would just go back to the Kraft presentation. The only time that Kraft really came off as in a defensive position was with the Parcells interview, when he really, the only negative thing they allowed in there against Kraft was Parcells. If you stop and think about it, I mean, okay, Kraft talked about the snow game, about how he, broke the rules, and he talked about Hernandez. He apologized to the world, but what else is he going to say? And the question, the Parcells thing was the only negative thing.
And it was Parcells, expressing the negative thing about, how Kraft stepped in, took his power away during the draft, and Parcells basically called out Kraft for not really having any credentials to do any of what he was doing.
Right.
Or anyone else that Kraft had appointed as having a clue about anything football-wise.
Right.
So it was Parcells' commentary that was the most damning against Kraft, So, but that was in episode 1 or 2. but now that we're toward the end of the whole thing, and Kraft has been put in a much better light. And what I find interesting is that there are people who are angry. How narratives change. People wanted Belichick out after 4-13 and said, okay, well, but people have come to Bill's defense in wake of this documentary and basically saying, it's intentionally putting him in a bad light. I've seen a lot of fan reaction, and they don't like it. They don't like having Bill as cast as the evildoer, and so on and so forth. I think the biggest problem, having seen the whole series in its entirety now several times, is that Bill was responsible for a lot of it, but I think the series piled on a little too much, and that got, and like you were saying, it kind of reversed on Kraft because they thought it was intentionally done that way, portraying Bill in such a negative light.
In order to elevate his chances for the Hall of Fame or its legacy, or both?
Probably both. Now, full disclosure, I did have Matt Hamachek, the director, on my podcast.
Of which we've not been part of, by the way.
Sorry. Well, don't worry. You'll get your turn.
Okay, thank you.
Don't worry.
I'm not worried. I'm not worried.
Bob, I saved the best for last. No.
I'm not worried. Do I act worried?
Yes. But I asked him directly. I said, there are a lot of people who don't like this series because Bill's the bad guy. And his response was, well, he didn't see it that way. And then he pointed out all the instances where he cast Belichick in a good light. So, and spoiler alert, it's either 9 or 10 where Belichick gets his due once again as a defensive genius in the episode where they talk about the second Super Bowl win over the Rams. And there's some new detail there as to Bill's genius. And then I don't know if you guys have seen the whole thing, but
No, but you've seen 9 and 10?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Hey Bob, what is wrong with us?
Huh? No, we're just on the outs. No. I'm worried. I'm not worried.
Well, I got sent screeners.
I mean, she only talks to guys that are seen 9 and 10. Apparently, that we're not 9 and 10ers.
Yeah. Well, I had.
It's a private club. If you're not a 9 and 10er, you're just not a part of the Karen universe.
More full disclosure. I had both the author and the director on the podcast.
We had the author a couple times.
All right. Well, there you go.
In fact, we had him last week.
And how did you find him?
Jeff, we've had him on before. Oh, I thought he was pretty good. He kind of explained away why it's a silly notion that it was a propaganda piece for Robert Kraft. It couldn't possibly be, because look at all the bad things we talked about: Aaron Hernandez, Deflategate, Spygate. Those are all negative stories that impact the ownership, impact the franchise, impact its brand. So I thought Jeff did a good job. He's a nice guy. We had him on. We wrote the book. We had him on another time too.
Well, I was going to say I had him on. I mean, almost out of jealousy and envy, but the access he was given, by Kraft was. I mean, he was like behind the scenes everywhere.
Oh, you're right, Karen. That was really impressive.
To the point where he was literally, although this wasn't written or known, he was at Kraft's house when Brady came over to say goodbye.
Right.
That's how much access this guy had.
Right.
You know, he was like
That's how important this was to
right,
craft. That's
right,
you know what, you don't give that kind of access for something that's not important.
right.
I mean, that's how much
Well,
I think.
he was the
Probably,
proverbial fly on the everyone's proverbial fly on the wall where everyone would have loved to have been during all these moments. And if he wasn't there, you still, it's like I remember, like he had me at hello in his book. It's like the first chapter, or I think it was like the prologue. And I told him this too, where he basically takes you inside of the hospital room with Drew Bledsoe
Yeah.
and Kraft, Brady, and Belichick being there at bedside. And it's almost like, oh my God, he was there too.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. But, you know, that was his skill as a writer
Yeah.
in talking to all the people involved, that it's like you did believe he was sitting there,
Yeah.
you know, or watching these three men huddle over Drew, and you know, with Drew's wife there, and how things turned, you know, from
Yeah.
you know how things were born, and you know, the chapter moved forward with these three. So anyway, I thought there were a lot of things in the book that were revelatory, and I do think there were a lot of things in the docuseries that were as well, but mostly they were revelatory because you heard it out of like the horse's mouth, so to speak. That I thought the player interviews in particular um, were very, very good. And again, there's plenty of things that you hear that take you aback, and you'll be taken aback in episode 9 by
yeah,
some.
we ever get to it, right?
I'm not gonna, spoiler alert.
We have access.
No, Karen, don't.
Spoiler alert. All I'm gonna say is I will give you a tease. Do you want a tease?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we need it. You know, Lobel and Lynch, we're has-been. So we really need this.
Well, it's tomorrow, and it's a few. Well, you will be floored by a couple of players who are critical of Bill Belichick that you would never in a million years believe would ever be critical.
Okay, I can tell you who my guess would be is Gronkowski and Brewski.
You don't think Gronkowski would be critical of Bill?
Oh, all right, I don't know. Okay.
By the way,
All right, okay, forget it. Forget it. A spoiler alert, right?
Another spoiler alert for you guys. Speaking of Rob, he's going to be on my pod next week.
Oh, you know what? This is just.
How's that, Bob?
Maybe you can put a
I'm
good
impressed. You
word
know
in
what? I'm proud of you. That's good. That's a good thing. Okay. Tell us what time and what, okay. Just, when is it on so we can help you do this?
It'll be
Obviously, you don't need us.
When does it drop?
it will be dropped live Tuesday afternoon next week.
Okay. Put that right here.
You know, I'll put an asterisk. You know, Rob has agreed to do it, but there's also always the possibility he might forget.
This is true.
Can we get back to the Bruins now?
He's the Grand Marshal of the marathon, so he's got.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's.
Well, tell him he's got to run it first before he can be Grand Marshal.
Well, I'm going to ask him if he's training. You know.
Okay, back to the Bruins. Can we do that before we leave?
No.
Wait
a minute.
Whatever you want.
Here's one question I have about this dynasty.
All right.
I mean,
Good.
football. There's 53 football players. There's probably 100 people in that locker room every single day. How has no one spilled the beans on what really happened with Malcolm Butler? Is it because only 2 people on this planet, or 3 people, Ernie Adams, Bill Belichick, and Malcolm, know?
Probably.
Well,
You had a coach. You had a coach on there, Josh McDaniels, claiming he didn't know what happened. You had Devin McCourty on there saying he's asked coaches, he's asked people, and they tell him they don't know. But the most poignant thing from was I think Danny Amendola saying the players felt robbed because they thought they should have won that Super Bowl and were made angrier because they never got an explanation as to why Malcolm was benched. Their best cornerback did not play in that game. In a game where Tom Brady threw for a record 503 yards, they scored just about every single time they touched the ball. They never punted and lost that game.
Didn't Robert himself
Blame Belichick. Yeah.
Yes, basically spilled the beans and said this was a personal confrontation between.
No, he said it was a personal matter. He did not describe it as a confrontation. He said it was a personal issue.
But you and I have both heard the rumors about confrontation.
Well, there's a lot of rumors, Bob.
Okay, well, now spoiler alert. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't know. I can't put my finger on the right one, but there's been quite a few and several whoppers in there. But
yes,
what's fascinating is Malcolm Butler continues to say he doesn't know, and yet he has a book and a movie coming out.
And he just retired.
Yes, he did. So I don't know.
So now he's retired. Belichick is, let's just say he's done coaching for now. Isn't this the perfect time for it to come out? Because Butler doesn't have to worry about betraying anyone, having some other coach take it out on him. He's retired now. And Belichick is Belichick. Isn't this now the time?
But isn't this just a rumor? Isn't just our curiosity about the salaciousness of the potential region? It's just,
but I have a feeling we're going to be, if we ever find out, it will not live up to anyone's expectation.
It's pretty interesting.
That's just what I'm saying. Hey, I have a great idea for you guys.
What? Have them on?
Why don't you get Bill to be the tri-anchor for UnAnchored?
Have Belichick be a third wheel?
Yes. No?
I don't know, Bob. Do we want him? Should he do some time in the minor leagues?
How do you think? You have two lively guys like you, and then you have Belichick come on.
Well, he looked like Luca Brasi in The Godfather when he was at the bar and they stabbed his hand. That's what he looked like.
Well, I don't know. They're going to make a fortune whether Peyton Manning's trying to hire him.
Yeah.
For his thing, and maybe have him and Saban do a podcast. Which would be cool.
Who do you think Belichick would pick to ride cross country?
Oh.
Well.
Wow, that's an interesting question. Yeah. See, wouldn't you like to have him on?
I think he'd pick his dad.
He'd pick his dad?
I think he would.
That's a great answer, Bob.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much.
I can't come up with a better one.
Thank you, Karen.
Bob feels a lot better now, not having seen.
I do feel a lot better, right? But I feel vindicated.
You feel better,
Bob? George Gray, let's see before we.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I offered my Joe Fitzgerald touch on you, Bob. I made you feel vindicated. There you go.
You're the best. You are the best, actually.
Hey, you know what? If you're thinking about a new car, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, as we call him, George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. George is a big fan of this show. He's touches base with us every now and then, and I'll be interested to find out who he'd like to ride cross-country with. But we learned two things today: who Karen's going to ride cross-country with, that Deion Branch, a great choice, and that Lobel and Lynch are finally on the outside looking in now at episodes 9 and 10. We're not big wheels anymore, Bob.
No, I'm not sure we ever were, but we're in our own minds.
Hey, I'll get you up to speed after. How's that?
Oh, you're such a kind person. All right, Karen, I love you. You're the best. Thank you so much for being with us.
I love you too, and I love coming on.
All right, Karen.
Well, it's
Anytime.
nice that you can make time for us, and tell Rob we said hi.
I will. I'll pass that along.
Tuesday afternoon, we're gonna catch it and find out if he remembers. We'll be tuning in. And all you people out there, don't forget to check us out on UnAnchoredBoston.com.